Welcome to the True Sight podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen. Today we're joined by the head coach of Evil Geniuses, Peter Dunn. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hello, good morning, I guess. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's morning for me. I don't think it's morning for you right now, but does it matter more what the local time zone is or what your body clock is telling you?
Maybe body clock. It's definitely been a bit interesting. I've been working nights to help the team get ready for the preseason tournament and the regular season. So really looking forward to seeing them play this weekend. It should be a fun introduction.
Yeah, the lock-in tournament is coming up. So we're recording this on Wednesday. The lock-in tournament starts on Friday. You know, we're almost there. We're so close. We've had some LPL starting. We've had LCK starting. But it's almost time for North America. You did have a little bit of North American games starting with amateur tournaments and so on. But, I think LCS is a bit of a different beast, of course. So for you and your team, how has that prep been going? How are scrims going with the Evil Geniuses LCS team? Do you have your whole team together, or is it starting to click?
Scrims are going well. .tm. Honestly, we started a bit later than most teams. I think most teams started on the 28th of December, and we started on the 4th. So it was definitely a little bit, let's say, interesting at the start. But especially over the past couple of days, there have been kind of clear improvements shown. I feel one or two of our players may have been a bit jet lagged at the start, but it was definitely it's definitely been fun to watch them play and to see certain players meet expectations and some players exceed expectations, which will be really interesting for the fans when they see it on stage. So yeah, looking forward to this lock-in tournament, and I think EG could definitely be competitive. So.
Yeah, for sure. For a team like yourselves, who are, I think most people would put you somewhere in the middle of the table, right? Like somewhere maybe that 4th to 6th range. I think most people would probably land you guys. How do you approach a tournament like the lock-in? When you're maybe not a number one favorite to win, and you're thinking, oh, we gotta buckle down and get that prize money. It's a little bit more of a you could go either way, right? You could say let's do everything we can because we want to win that prize money, or you could say let's use this more as treat it more as practice. Be a little bit less pressure on ourselves. Like, how do you approach a tournament like this one? Because it's a brand new thing for North America.
Sure, it is a brand new thing, and I mean it's a brand new thing with a very large prize pool. I mean, for people who want context, the prize pool for first place for this tournament is more than the prize pool for a team in the quarterfinals of Worlds. It's a lot of money in terms of prize pool. Yeah. But to be honest, the prize pool doesn't really affect how we approach this tournament. What really matters to a team like ours is how fans value a tournament like this. And I had a similar situation a couple of years ago on Splice when we went to Rift Rivals. And a lot of people on the other teams that went with us were kind of belittling the tournament and saying it didn't matter. But our fans told us, this is a tournament we really care about, because it's Splice's first chance since 2016 to play an international tournament. So we want you to take this seriously. And so we took it seriously. It wasn't the greatest Rift Rivals tournament for us, but we took it seriously, and the same thing will apply for this lock-in tournament. We've heard a lot of people who are really keen to see our roster in action from the start, hit the ground running, and also who want reassurance that this isn't going to be a wasted year for EG. And this is kind of why I wouldn't say we're going 100% for this tournament, but we're definitely in the 90s for how seriously we're taking this tournament. It's something which matters to us, and it's important that we answer preemptively some of the concerns that people have about our roster, and I think that this is something that we'll be able to see the results of it this tournament. Again, it's worth saying we started scrims a week later than other people due to visas and immigration and things like this. So we may be a bit rusty at the start, but we're not going to go in and pick Teemo top lane, or things like this. Like we're going to be playing. We're going to be taking it seriously.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I think going into a tournament like this one, when it is, like we have somewhat templates to model it on with Caspa Cup, Demacia Cup. These are off-season events that are kind of, early looks at teams' rosters, things like that. Like, this is somewhat similar to that, but it does feel a little different to me because it's so close. Like, it actually is kind of a part of the official calendar as opposed to somebody else is putting this on during some downtime. And I think there was potential for the LCS to message it in different ways and try to shape the fan expectations. You could put it out like, hey, this is going to be a fun kind of celebration of the start of the year, a little bit more towards the All-Stars angle. Like, you get to see your players again. It's been a long time. And be a fan. Or you can angle it more towards like, this is the first chance for these teams to prove themselves and look how big the prize pool is. And it's been a little hard for me to tell what the intention was behind it. And so knowing that, the teams are going to have to figure out how seriously they are being messaged to take it, it has put the event in a little bit of an awkward spot for me. And partly that I think that's natural because it is the first time they're running it and they haven't really figured out what the fans want even. But I think, knowing that the teams can look at it and say, this is actually really important for us to the extent that you actually have the opportunity, even because there are other teams that, like you say, you guys started scrims later than some other teams. Well, there are other teams that still don't have their actual starting roster together, right? So there's a little bit of a mix of those.
I'm excited to see how actually Riot North America spin this tournament, because obviously this is a big change, big sort of shift in the dynamic in North America. I mean, a lot of the more established stars, arguably the two faces of the league in Bjergsen and Doublelift retired last summer. And this is kind of a new chapter in how North America will approach kind of this new generation that's coming up. And I'm very interested to see how it will be. There's a lot of from what I've seen in scrims, and obviously scrims, with the caveat that scrims don't translate to stage, the North American league in terms of playstyle is going to be a very, very different league in 2021 to how it was in 2020 and how it's been in the past. And this should be interesting. I don't think, people have sometimes somewhat harshly had the, NA doesn't understand side lane memes in the past. I think this year teams do understand side lanes, and it's not just going to be about team fighting. And
you imagine there's going to be some growing pains in that, right? Like if you go, okay, hey, wait a second, playing through the side lanes is important, but it's going to take us a while to actually figure out how to do it properly, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of people who are coming into the league who have really, really good understanding about how League of Legends should be played. And the thing is that these players are not all congregating on individual teams, and this is something that is a big deal for next season. I mean, sure, there've been coaching changes, but really, when you bring in somebody like Sword Art, when you bring in somebody like Perks, I've got to be really careful how I handle this. The mechanical difference is not really that large. People always overstate the mechanical difference between players, and I'm not trying to, tone down how good players like Perks and Sword Art are in the league. They're obviously big, stars with a strong mechanical basis. But the thing that they really add to the league is in-game understanding. And I think you're going to see a bit more sophistication in how teams play. And I don't think that this is that the sort of the patches that have allowed teams to succeed domestically but not internationally in North America in previous seasons are going to apply this year. And I have no idea how Cloud9, how TSM, how Evil Geniuses are going to do this year. But the teams that go to Worlds from North America this year will understand how to play high-quality League of Legends, and that is going to make a big difference at the end of the year. Even if Cloud9 don't go or TSM don't go, just having those people in the league is going to have an impact.
Yeah, because the teams that beat them will have had to figure out how to beat what they're bringing in.
Exactly.
I've definitely seen, on kind of the Perks point, for example, I've seen comments where talking about, I did a video last week about, if TL win, here are the reasons that I think they'll win, because here are all the positive arguments going for them. And then people coming in the comments and saying, no way, Perks is just going to smash Jensen in lane and then the whole thing's over because Perks is so good. And I'm like, okay, no. That's not how this works. Like, the game is not that simple. And also, I don't think Perks will smash Jensen in lane for what it's worth. I think Perks will do a lot of other things better. And in theory he'll connect with his team better and play on the map better and synchronize in certain ways, all that kind of stuff. But this is not the game where you get these 1v1 matchups and whichever team has more winning 1v1 matchups wins the game. Like it's just not how it works.
The one thing that I'm actually a bit sad about is that Nisqy's not going to be in North America anymore, because I think it would have been really interesting to see Nisqy in this kind of an environment as well, with when you have lane dominant players like Jojopyun and Perkz in the league who really like to play with their junglers. You have but the way that these guys play lane is not just for individual advantage. Like the way that Jensen normally plays lane is for individual advantage. Generally, when he's playing TF, it's different, but generally, players like Power Evil and Jensen are laners that play for their individual advantage, whereas Perkz and Jojopyun are players that play much more aggressive and can play for jungle advantage or play for side lane advantage, right? Like if you're a primarily assassin player, there's 2 juicy targets in bot lane and 1 juicy target in mid lane who you could snowball on if your enemy lane is being too passive. And it would have been interesting to have somebody who was on the opposite spectrum to this, to see somebody who was also willing to roam. But aside from that, I think that there's a really, really interesting variety. I have to admit that I found it quite hard to watch sort of sub LCS North American talent. I mean, I when I was coming to North America, I wanted to do a lot of research and consume as much as I possibly could. But it's hard to track somebody's history. So for instance, when I was following Kazi, I could watch 4 years of VODs. I could watch VODs of Kazi really easily from when he was he must have been 14, maybe 15 at the time. And those VODs were online and they were very easy to track down. And when I'm trying to watch somebody like Palafox, my information on Palafox is basically his academy career. And it's really hard to track kind of somebody's natural instincts. Like when you're really scouting a player, you want to see what they were like when they were 15 playing in amateur tournaments. And so my understanding of some of the rookies coming up isn't that good for their natural instincts, but I've seen how they play in academy and I'm really interested to see how they transfer. So although I've said there's no Nisqy, Palafox did play a little bit like that in Cloud9 Academy. So maybe I'm understating how different the variety in styles would be. But definitely for the experienced players in North America, you can expect a lot of lane dominance. That means a lot of 2v2 fighting around mid, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the jungle pool at the LCS level NNA, you get the jungle part of that jungle mid duo. And I think there are some pretty good junglers for that kind of style who are going to want to carry and going to want to exert pressure on that. So that's going to be kind of fun to watch. I know for sure the Svenskeren Jojopyun pairing is one that I'm going to want to learn a lot about and see how well they work together. And so hopefully, this lock-in tournament will be a chance to see that and start to get a sense of it, because right now the meta does, a lot of the jungle meta seems to stylistically be carrying over from what we've been seeing for the past few months, right? With a lot of carrying, a lot of farming up and making the jungler a really important part of what's supposed to be happening later in the game, right? So it's not this Lee Sin, Gragas Elise, go and gank everybody and sacrifice yourself unless you're Karsa and playing Pantheon all the time. But let's not model ourselves after that. So I think from my perspective, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I thought Svenskeren's year in 2020 was a pretty poor year, especially compared to what we've seen from him in the past. And this, to me, I'm looking for the kind of the comeback story. Is that the way you see? I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about it that way because it's not helpful, but
I mean, what I would say is that it's very hard to judge a jungler in isolation. And there were all kinds of, without using inside knowledge, it was very clear that there were many different directions that EG were being pulled into play last year. And obviously it becomes very hard. As a jungler, your role in a team like that is to patch up holes as best as you see them. And in order to keep your team playing at a reasonable level, often it means you are going to look awful in that kind of situation. What I would say is another jungler like that is Xerxes, right? Xerxes has been a jungler who was considered, basically top 3 jungler since he came into the league. He had 4 years, 3 years or 4 years, 4 years in the league, where he was considered a top 3 jungler almost without question. And last year he had a rough year on Origin. But the reason he was having a rough year isn't because Xerxes suddenly forgot how to jungle. It's because he was doing a patching role rather than kind of playing an aggressive role to his kind of his playstyle. And I think that that's a little bit what Svenskeren was having to do last year. And I think with the roster that we have this year, in particular, with IgNar and Impact coming in, that will give him more support and more backup for how he wants to play. I will say that I think that in North America, Impact especially is categorized very, very incorrectly. Just because he's a really good. I mean, nobody disputes that Impact is like the god of weak side, right? But just because somebody can play weak side doesn't mean they can't play strong side too. And just looking at Impact, I always suspected this was the case because before he came to North America, his champion pool was not a weak side champion pool.
No. I mean, his classic champion was Renekton for the first couple of years, right?
Yep, Renekton, Jarvan. Yes, Singed. I remember he has a really good pocket Singed as well.
Singed, though, see, this is my thing on Impact, is that I think a lot of people have talked about Impact as he's good at weak side, but he can't carry, which I don't think is fair at all. I think there's a difference between saying you're not good at carrying versus saying you're not good at strong siding. And strong siding implies applying pressure in the lane and having the jungler join you and setting up dives and tower pressure and all that kind of stuff, right? Which is different to me. I've always felt that Impact struggled, whether it was entirely on him or largely because of the team environment and knowing how to work around him, but he seemed to struggle with applying lane pressure and like winning his 1v1 laning matchups to create the strong side setups, which is very, because he can carry, like he played these Singed games, but you weak side lane in Singed and then carry later, right?
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, when we talk about a good strong side player, we're not necessarily talking about somebody who will solo kill the enemy. We're talking about somebody who is a good 2v2 laner in terms of how they control waves, right? And this is a criticism which has often been leveled at somebody. Let's talk about a player that I worked with in the past, somebody like Kobe, right? Who is obviously somebody who can carry, but is somebody who wasn't considered a good strong side player. Now, in Kobe's defense, when Kobe was playing with Mickey, he was like, his laning was really, really insane and considered like amongst the best in the league. So I think it kind of depends a little bit on which support you're playing with bot lane. It's a bit harder to judge. But you can carry from weak side. But the way you carry is often slightly different. But for somebody like Impact, I think Impact is a fantastic strong side player. He just hasn't been put on strong side, maybe because the teams he was on, preferred to play with support as the primary carry or with AD carry as the primary carry. And his kind of knowledge of when to push advantages, how to control his wave, how to space appropriately, how to set up 2 minutes in advance for ganks and things like this is really, really top notch. And I think he's a player that can play strong side. I'm not going to say we are going to play him strong side, but I'm going to say that to just categorize him as a pure weak side player is doing him a massive disservice. And I hope teams do that coming into next year because he's going to prove a lot of people wrong.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see. And I've been a huge Impact fan for a long time because I think even when people were characterizing him as only a weak side player, even within that storyline, he was being underrated. And people weren't even appreciating how valuable that was given the teams he was playing on and the role he was filling. So for a long time, I've been, one of the guys boosting up Impact is like, hey, you guys don't actually recognize how good he is. And then and I'm even one of the people who struggle to see him as a good strong side player. So if he adds more of that in, and that becomes, just another flavor you can bring out, even if you only do it 20% of the time or something, it makes it harder to draft against you guys and all that other stuff. So I would love to see it.
I mean, I think Impact has a bit of the Odo problem, right? Which is that in Europe, Odo Omne is considered to be one of the best weak side top laners in the league. And therefore, because he's so willing to play the Maokai, he's so willing to play all of these, weak side champions, in Impact's case, the Ornn, the Mordekaiser, people just assume, oh, this is all he can play. But no. He's willing to sacrifice for his team because he thinks that by playing weak side, because weak side is harder to play than strong side, to be clear. Like, it's really hard to be a good weak side player. That he can he can contribute and allow other people to carry, and he's taking the responsibility on himself. And because he's willing to do that, it's so easy as a coach to just go say, sure, go and play your Mordekaiser or something like this, and we'll focus on the other side of the map. And thank you for making that sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
And I think therefore he's been pigeonholed into that role a bit. But definitely, like, impact is no joke. He's better than people think he is, and people already think he's really, really good. So yeah, looking forward to showing it.
And I think there are some other pieces on your team that are going to make that more of an option, right? Having IgNar come in, and he's a guy who loves to get out of lane, and we saw mostly last year, we saw him get into mid lane or help out mid lane because Power of Evil was kind of what FlyQuest played through so much of the time. But you can also have that support roam up to the top lane or be playing into the enemy jungle, things like that. How much is he going to affect the way you guys set up your game plans?
So IgNar is somebody who is a player who is very good at playing around vision and is never afraid to go in. And I think one of the biggest advantages of having a player like IgNar on your team is he is, and I know this from Europe, extremely stressful to play against, because when he like channels, when somebody stands in the middle of mid lane and they start channeling their Hex Flash, they're kind of bluffing a lot of the time. With IgNar, he's not bluffing. Like, a lot of the time, he's not bluffing. You see the engage and you think, oh, he's not gonna go. He's not going in here. Surely he's not going in. No, he's going in, and that means you have to respect a lot more with IgNar than you would with almost any other support. I mean, this guy is. I like players who play without fear, and IgNar has never had any fear at any point in his career. He's a player that is very smart about the game, but also is a player that has very good instincts. And there's some supports that people have talked about who force themselves to play this engaged role for the team. But what I would say is that remember that IgNar's best performance in his career probably is when he was on Misfits, when Misfits made quarterfinals of Worlds. And it's worth saying that when they made Worlds, it was the Ardent Center meta, and everybody was playing Ardent Center. I thought the meta was complete garbage, but like everyone was doing it. And what were Misfits doing? Misfits were playing Leona with what was it called?
Yeah, Ignite and all that.
Ignite, but also I've forgotten what the rune was. But pure laning,
like Hail of Blades or whatever, right?
Was it Hail of Blades?
Yeah, one of those like attack speed related.
For further battle. There you go. Yeah. Which was not even like, that Leona falls off at like 10 minutes, and they were going pure laning phase, pure aggression all the time. And he's not afraid to challenge convention, and he is very, very aggressive. And I really like that in a player. Like I mean, I don't think you can have 5 IgNars on a team, but having one IgNar, is not a bad thing. And having 2 or 3 is even better, which is what I think this EG team will be like.
And what you need on your own team when you have that, right, is people willing to follow up. Because like if you have the support who's going to go in, or the jungler who's always going to go in, and you're not the people who are going to back them up and like, oh, I know he's about to go in, so I better position for it. Then you get like, I've been watching some of the first day of LCK, and you have like Vista playing on Hanwha with Deft, and he's going in every single time, and like they haven't quite figured out that they need to go in with it yet. It's just brand new team kind of things and a new player. But you've got some players in your team that are definitely like Impact. We've already talked about him. He's a really good team fighter, and knowing how to follow stuff up. And you've got someone like Jizuke who, I think one of the issues with him in 2020 was sometimes he was going in too often. He was playing too aggressively. But you pair a couple of those players together, and potentially you've got a really good fit, right?
Sure. And I mean, you can sometimes see this difficulty in difference in identity, right? Like. Mm-hmm. I've got to be careful how I phrase this. There are some, you can have success with a team that has certain very, very aggressive players and certain players who are not the most aggressive. But if you have that disconnect in style, individual players will often look really, really bad.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention any teams, but there's some very clear teams who were very good teams in 2020 who had that disconnect. And maybe it led to people mischaracterizing the strength of their players, right? And this is something obviously we have to be aware of with EG. Like any team that wants to play this kind of aggressive style, you cannot wait for your 100-0 opportunity if you're going to play as an aggressive team. You have to accept that sometimes you're going to flip a coin and your flip is going to come out wrong and you're going to look really bad.
Yeah. You got to take your 60-40s, right?
Exactly. You got to take your 60-40s, you got to take your 70-30s. And I think so, one of the metaphors I've heard, right, for this kind of thing is, why take a 70-30 now when if you wait 10 minutes, you can take a 90-10, right? But the thing is, if the team you're against has that option, right? If you're both sitting in a room and, the person who leaves gets the jackpot, but the probability goes up, so you're sitting in a room back to back, whoever leaves the room first wins. But if you go to the door first and you have as time increases, the probability goes up. And my philosophy is, sorry, this was a bit of a tangent, is that you're both facing back to back. At what point do you stand up and go for your chance, right? And take your 70-30 chance that, the door may slam in your face. And all coaches and all players have different tolerance for this. And I would say that throughout my coaching career, maybe my tolerance as a coach has been higher than most. I mean, even on the splice teams, which went 35 minutes, we were still taking risks. It doesn't mean that they were good risks, but we were still taking them. So I think that's what we'll see. That's what we'll see from EG this year. And maybe it doesn't work and we end up playing for 40 minutes again, but I don't believe that's going to be the case.
But I really do love teams that play that way. I think that the team that I always think about in that perspective is Clutch Gaming when they went to Worlds. When they had players like Demonte, they had Vulcan, who loved to go in and start plays and get aggressive on the map. Huni was also part of that. And then you had, Lyra coming in as this great secondary engager who somebody's going to make the first play and he's so good at being right behind the first play and making the continuation, whether he's going in with the Skarner ultimate after the initial engage and grabbing the exact right target. And then you had Cody Sun doing cleanup, right? Which, again, ready to follow up those engages. And you had a team that could put all those actions together in the right way, that they really became kind of more than the sum of their parts. And having a team that is willing to have a couple of trigger pullers and a few people who know exactly how to follow them up and be ready for them and know, hey, looks like, because sometimes these things happen so fast that you can't tell the rest of your team, it's okay, I'm about to engage in 7 seconds, so get ready to it doesn't, you have to have this intuitive aspect to this. So I think that's something that it's a lot easier in a lot of ways to play as a team that is looking for the other team to play into you, and then you just exploit any kind of cracks in the way they've created their engage. But it's a lot more, you have so much more control when you're the team that can put that whole engage and playmaking setup together.
Sure. It's also about trust, right? Sometimes somebody can go in for what is a good engage, but because their teammates hesitate for 1 second or 2 seconds, it looks awful, right? And this is something which obviously we have to rely on. We have to work on EG for this year if we're going to kind of play this style. And what I would say is that sometimes players who are considered to be inconsistent are often treated as being inconsistent because they find really good engagers and there's no follow-up. Just to throw one name out there, Hylissang is a player which is very highly regarded by pro players in Europe, but is maybe not as highly regarded by fans. I would just say that sometimes you can find those holes, but you have to take the risk and you have to trust that your team will follow up. And IgNar is going to get that from his team, right? I mean, there's going to be no problems with that on EG.
That trust seems like something that can really kind of snowball either direction. Like if you trust them, you kind of take the risk and you trust your teammate and you follow them up, and it works out really well a few times. That just builds the trust up so much more. But if it doesn't work a few times, I'm sure there's a challenge, of anti-snowballing that, of like, hey, I have been trusting him for like 3 days and it's failed every time. What am I supposed to do now? Like, and that's what I imagine or would hope that a coach could come in and this is what you're here for, is to deal with those, those kind of high valence moments where the trust can go either direction. And I'm sure that's something that you've had to deal with in the past, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, but also it's about having having your players kind of trust the process that you're going through, right? And just understand that there will be growing pains and understand that it won't always work out correctly. But if you look at the top teams in the world, this is how League of Legends is played, right? You cannot try to outscale a team like G2. You're just never going to get the opportunity. You cannot outscale a team like Suning or like Damwon, because these teams, what they do is they build pressure through the threat of their aggression. They don't even have to make an aggressive play, but you know that they have the threat that they could do at any time. And it's something you can overcome in a best of one, but over the course of a best of 5, it mentally exhausts you. And this is something that we understand that we have to be able to do. And it's not enough to just find a style that succeeds in North America. At the end of the day, it's about finding a style that will help you succeed against the best teams. And maybe if you can't play that style, then you compromise and find patch solutions. But the way that people should aspire, in my opinion, as a coach, to play is to kind of set the pace of the game and to be in positions where you can always force at all times, so that you always have options. Because simply having that kind of play style puts burden on the enemy team and puts stress on the enemy team, especially in best of series. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you kind of hope that, in terms of the trust and the team's kind of synergy in that sense, you hope that you've built up enough, I guess, authority and like respect from your players as a coach, that even if they have trouble trusting their teammates, they're trusting you as a coach, they're trusting the systems you've built. They can say, hey, I know I'm struggling a little bit with this one teammate, but the entire system is going to work out. They'll do their part. I just have to do my part, and keep filling in my piece in that system, right?
I mean, all I would say is that I'm coming into North America. Like I've done nothing in North America yet. Like there's no guarantee that this year is going to go well. There's no guarantee that my style of play is going to work in North America.
Yeah.
But that's something I just have to work hard to prove to the community, to the fans, and also to my players, right? Like that this is a system that they should believe in, and that that kind of starts here. It's not. I don't believe that trust should come on the basis of reputation or the basis of past results, right? Like to me, season 11 is different from season 10, season 9, season 8. Maybe you were a very successful coach in season 6, but the game is fundamentally different in season 11, and it doesn't. The things that you've done in the past have no bearing on how well you can cope in the future. You have to relearn the game every single year, and this is kind of one of the things that I really, really like about League of Legends. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about EG. I think I've said this publicly before, but I interviewed I wanted to come to North America this year. I have an ambition as a coach to coach in all the major regions, and at least have a good idea about how teams run, how just from the cultural perspective, it's super, super interesting to me as a coach. And this is and I interviewed as a result with a number of North American teams, but EG were the team that basically said, okay, we want to give you a lot of control over this roster, but if we're going to do this, we want you to prove yourself, right? We're not going to take your reputation for in-game or out of game on the basis of reputation. We're going to go hard on you. We're going to make your life really, really uncomfortable in your interview. We're going to question you in depth,
test you, right? Like prove it.
Yeah, we're going to test you, and we're not going to be polite to you. Like The worst thing, if you're appealing to a coach like me, is that you just say, you kind of bow down and say, oh, we really respect what you do. No, I want to be tested. I want this from my players, right? I want my players, if they think that I'm doing something wrong, or they think that I'm wrong about something, the worst thing a player can possibly do is just sit there and nod and just accept it on reputation. It's Peter, he's saying this, I have to respect him. No, challenge me. And this is something which EG did, and this really, really impressed me about EG. And when I was kind of making my choice for team to go to, the fact that they took nothing on reputation is the thing which I really, really respected about this org. And I like what they're doing. So.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that EG are doing, in terms of bringing you in and the way they brought you in, and then other things just with the way they're building out their entire roster's system, not just the LCS team, but beyond, that show that EG are really building for the long term. They want to build something that is going to go beyond just what's going to give us the best chance of winning this year, but what's going to set us up for success 2, 3, 5 years down the line. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your academy and amateur plans, and starting with the fact that it took you guys so long to announce your academy roster. You had an amateur announced before academy. What was up with that? What took so long? Was it just getting everything official?
No, we're building up the hype, Tim. Like we're building. Save the best to last. No. There were some decisions we had to make. We don't take the decision to put somebody who's 16, like Jojopyun, in academy lightly. I mean, to be clear, 16-year-olds generally should be in school, and there's a reason why the minimum age for LCS is 17, right? And we wanted to be really, really clear. We believe he has a huge amount of talent, but we wanted to be clear that we had the right setup for him in Los Angeles, and I think he's a player that has a bag of talent, but we're not going to sacrifice his schooling in order for him to be able to show his talent. He's going to be doing a full school day, getting up really, really early in the morning before he goes and does scrims. We even found a nice East Coast school that will allow his schedule to not interfere with scrims because of the time difference, which I hadn't even considered as a solution. But we believe that this was somebody who deserved a shot in academy. But if we were going to make it work, we would have to, it's not something we could take lightly. So I think that was one factor. I think also visas was another factor with Mystiques. There were a lot of decisions that were made for academy, which we had to make sure we went through the correct steps to make sure everything in the process was covered properly. Amateur wasn't a problem because amateur is something that I'm not sure how much of this is public knowledge, and I know Empire's in the chat, so I've got to be careful about this. But Empire has been working with a certain amateur team for a long time, and we knew this team well. I'm not sure how if I'm allowed, but we know this team for a long time.
Here are the rumors I've heard. The rumors I heard were that Zenith was out there as an amateur team, and EG kind of partnered with them and then brought them into the fold. That's just a rumor, and you don't have to say anything about it either way. But I just heard that as a rumor.
I mean, I couldn't possibly comment, but all I would say is we knew the 5 amateur players and the amateur coach we wanted to work with, like before I joined EG, right? Like this is, and obviously when I joined, I had to do a quick look over for all the players and that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm very happy with the amateur team we've got in place. I think there's some really, really strong talent there, and I would be shocked if you didn't see at least 2 to 3 of those guys, maybe even all 5, but at least 2 to 3 in the LCS within, let's say 2 years. Let's say something which I'm certain, like a certain inverted commas bet, that I'm certain I'll win, right? Like 2 to 3 of those guys will definitely be in LCS in 2 years, and that's a good reason for people to go out and watch. To go out and watch Academy and Amateur. I mean, the new system is really, really is really fun, and I know a lot of people in Europe love to watch EU Masters because they like to spot the stars of the future. But the new system that they have for Amateur and Academy is very, very exciting, and I really like what Riot North America have done. I will say that I still think the EU Master system is better, but Riot EU had those domestic leagues already in place.
There are structural elements that allow EU Masters to exist, like the fact that you have, a Portuguese league, a German league, a Spanish league, and you can just take the top teams and put them together. You can't come into North America and say, hey, we've got a West Coast league, an East Coast league, a couple of Central leagues, and we're just going to take that. Like, that infrastructure doesn't exist to draw from right now, right?
And the system that they put in place with the multiple tiers and multiple. If you do badly in Academy, you will go and play with the amateur teams. And I love that. I really, really love that. And
by the way, Zeyzal is that player, an example of that player, and he has been just destroying these games this week. So I love to see it.
And what I would say is, watch Amateur this year. It will be exciting. It will be interesting. This is a good step in the right direction for North American talent. Like, I cannot stress, this is, it's not a single player. It's not perks coming in. It's not like, coaching staff or something coming from different regions, which is going to make the difference in the long term. It's the infrastructure that you have in place, and the infrastructure North America have put in place this year is really good, and you should go out and support it, because if you are a fan of North American League, it doesn't matter. Your individual team may be really, really good this year, but if you don't have the talent pipeline, they're not going to be good forever. And this talent pipeline that they've got in place is going to be very exciting. And all I can say is that EG have bought in really hard to the system, and we believe that our amateur team and academy team is amongst the top out there. Even if people don't know some of the players on these teams, they'll know them very, very soon.
So EG Prodigies is 2-0 in the Risen tournament so far, I believe.
Yeah.
Can you remind us the roster and sell us on them being a top amateur team?
So the roster is do you the sales pitch? So the amateur team is Serti, top. What you need to know about Serti is he is he's primarily a carry player. He does have some good tank picks, but what I would say about Serti is he's a natural born leader. He has very, very good comms, and he's a player that wants to brawl you to the death. I'm not going to say he's champion pool because the tournament's still going on, but he's a very, very exciting top laner to watch. Definitely a strong side player. Very much likes to fight to the death. Tomio is a jungler who maybe people saw from Scouting Grounds. He's still in his final year of school. He is, I believe, still 17, although maybe he's just turned 8. No, he's still 17. And for people who play NA solo queue, he's the guy who's high on the ladder called C2 Meteos. He does a very entertaining stream. He's a very, very unique sense of humor, but quite a funny sense of humor. Likes his Chinese aggression, and is a carry jungler aspect. Pretty strong all around player. Has a very good pocket Azir. Has a couple of very strong assassin picks, but primarily, from what I saw in scouting before I joined EG, primarily a control mage player, but can be a two-way player, but is still developing his style. But very, very good control mage player. Dan, also 17. Is he called Dan anymore? I don't think he's called Dan anymore. He's called Shiro now, I think. I'm really embarrassed. I guess I don't, but I'm going to call him Dan. Dan Kaiser used to be a Kaiser one trick, has adapted over time, but really, really loves those champions that jump in. And missed, an engaged support player, likes laning phase, likes to play the engaged support. Actually, that team is even more aggressive than our main team. Holy moly! Those are 5 players that all want to jump in and skill check you at all points. Yeah, go and watch them. EG Prodigy is really, really fun to watch. All want to jump in all the time. Will fight you to the death, even when it's not good and they're outnumbered 3v5. But definitely a fun team to watch.
You're testing your mechanics.
Testing your mechanics, yeah. Empire's correcting me that his Dan Shiro Prince Zagreus cut. Okay, fine, whatever. The AD carry for ED Prodigies, whatever he chooses to go, whatever name he chooses to go on this time of the week. But yeah, they've performed pretty well so far. They played 4 games. So far they're 2-0, 2-0. Playing against some pretty good teams. I mean, Illinois State University are no jokes in the amateur scene. And they played them pretty well. So looking forward to see how the rest of the tournament progresses. Yeah, but good team to watch. Good team to watch.
And the hope will be for these guys that they can make it into proving grounds and play against the academy teams and potentially even match up against your academy team. So the academy roster you guys did land on. You mentioned a couple of the players from it, but the full lineup. So you have Jojopyun in mid, and you have Contractz in the jungle, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So worth quickly summarizing these guys as well for people who don't know the academy teams. Strongly recommend following both EG Amateur and EG Academy if you want to get into the scene. Obviously, I'm EG coach, so I'm going to say support our teams. But even if you don't want to support EG, you have an irrational hatred of all things, fun in the world. Then you should still follow these guys because they have a huge amount of talent. TonyTop, for people who don't know, is a player who was able to play Scouting Grounds for the first year this year. He just got his Canadian passport. He is a player who actually I first heard about through some of my contacts in China. He's been to the Scouting Grounds of certain LPL teams. I'm not going to say which ones, and has performed well. Was invited back last year, but chose to take North American residency for various reasons. Just non-league related. So a very exciting player. He's 20, but it's his first year this year to really show his talent. Very, very carry oriented to play. From anyone who knows him from solo queue, he will go ignite TP in certain matchups just frequently and try to kill you in lane. Contractz. I think Contractz was a top 6 jungler in LCS last year. I'm really glad we got him.
So I mean, in terms of Contractz, I had some kind of mixed tone things to say about the 100 Thieves lineup, and a lot of it spurred from like, but why aren't you keeping Contractz? And like, there are reasons for it, right? And they obviously have reasons why they let him go from the LCS team and ended up moving him onto you guys. But Contractz is really good, and I don't think it was appreciated how good he was and how important he was to like the pairing with Someday last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to have Contractz on EG. I think the guy is really good, and he's definitely good enough to play LCS. I'm really happy to have him. That's all I'm going to say. I thought Ander was a really good jungler in Academy last year. Like, I mean, I thought Ander was a top 2 jungler in Academy. But
yeah, I thought he was the best jungler in Academy. But I also thought that the jungle position in Academy last year was probably the weakest position. So just for whatever it's worth. Yeah. But yeah, Ander was decent. But Contractz is better.
I mean, we're not going to. But yeah. For mid, Jojo, what you need to know about Jojo is he's just turned 16. He turned 16 in late November, early December. Was an ex-Fortnite pro player. Made the transition to League. Climbed very high up, got banned for various reasons, did his time, and then climbed to top 10 in solo queue, got his account banned, and then created a new account from scratch and just climbed to top 5. Just for the fun of it. Because this is what you did. He has bags of talent. Is very, very raw. I'm glad that he has a jungler like Contractz to play with and a support like Mystiques who will guide him. But
hopefully a stabilizing personality as well. Yeah,
but definitely he's somebody to look out for. And if you're going to transition games, doing it at 16 doing it at 15 actually is a good time to do it. And he really impressed me. I mean, to be honest, he was a player that I'd never heard of before I came to North America, but it was one of the first players that Empire said to me, "You've got to look at this guy," and I did. And we were originally planning to consider him for amateur, but I mean, I think it was the right choice to move him to academy in 2021. Then we have at support at AD carry we have Shuryu, who is a player who came up alongside he was in the same generation as Tactical, right? And him and Tactical were considered pretty similar in terms of their potential when they were coming up together, but for various reasons, he had to take a break from the game and is kind of restarting. I would say his career after his break. I think he has a lot of potential, but I think he was a bit underrated as a result of kind of what happened on Team Liquid. And he's obviously somebody who has a very good relationship with Matt, who's our coach for Academy, and is somebody who showed really, really strong performances alongside Tony on Scouting Grounds. We drafted those guys specifically to scout. Actually, we have 3 of the 5 players we drafted in Scouting Grounds. I just realized we have Tony, and we have Shuri on our team. Huh. That's interesting. But working with those guys at Scouting Grounds, it was really clear that those were people we wanted to commit to. And I mean, just on the subject of Mystiques, I think Mystiques is similar to Contractz in that I think Mystiques is a top. Like, what's uncontroversial? If I said that Mystiques was a top 8 support in Europe, I think that wouldn't be controversial. I think he's higher than top 8, but I would say that he's consistently proven to be amongst the best supports in ERLs, and I'm shocked he's not playing in LEC. I'm just shocked he's not playing in LEC. So
what's the rationale then, as EG? What's the rationale for bringing a player like Mystiques into Academy? Is it just because he gives you, he's such a great player and you think he'll give you a chance to win, and winning is good for young players? Is it because he can be like a teacher? Is it because he can challenge your LCS starter? Like, what's the rationale for that?
So the rationale behind something like Mystiques is he's going to make sure you really, really good. Like, I mean, playing with a support of the caliber of Mystiques is fantastic. And I mean, he can help be support for Contractz. He can help develop Jojo, and he's somebody who can also push for a starting spot. But what I would say about Mystiques is, EG's philosophy is not. So often when you commit to an organization, you have to worry, if I commit to this organization, are they just going to lock me in the future, right? And what I would say with Mystiques is Mystiques' final goal is to play LCS or LEC. He's good enough to play LCS or LEC. Like, I'm just telling you, he's good enough. He's not even like close. He's not even like, one of those players who's 8 to 12, who's on the borderline. He's better than 8 to 12, right? Like, he's good enough to play in those leagues. And if we happen to have IgNar in our main team over him, and if he doesn't have the option at EG and somebody else wants him, like, good luck to this guy, because he's definitely good enough, and I'm shocked that we were able to get him. But when you see a player like this who's willing to play in your academy team, who's keen to prove himself, and who has that track record of success, and who is mechanically good enough because you've been following his career for multiple years, and they come to you and ask for the opportunity to prove themselves, you don't say no. Like, I mean, sure. You're just going to say, come here, see what you've got.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And yeah, so it wasn't a difficult decision.
And from his perspective, then, if you aren't able to break through into, taking over the LCS spot, or, getting acquired by another LCS team in season, something like that, there is, we have seen very recently, Treats was a player who was probably the best support in Academy in 2020. And he got an opportunity to go into the LEC this year, even though he, tried to take over the TSM starting spot. Some complicated reasons he wasn't able to hold on to it that we don't need to go into right now. I don't think it was his fault. And now he did end up in the LEC. So, maybe a player like Mystiques thinks, I can emulate that. I can do better. Maybe he thinks I'm better than Treats, and I can take that spot next year. So best of luck to him in achieving it.
I think also people have understated how much of a benefit going to North America can be if you are a top support in the ERLs and you don't have the opportunity to play LEC. We've seen this with players like Nisqy. We've seen it with Treats. I'm sure we'll see it with Mystiques at some point. But being able to go to a different region and can show a consistently high level of play demonstrates that you have good flexibility and you have good adaptability. And it's not something that everyone can do. And I'm not going to say that, people should be lining up to come and play in NA Academy, although I do think NA Academy is better than it was in the past. The system is better than it was in the past. But if you it's something that if you could show you have the flexibility and the adaptability to find success in multiple regions, it's not an option that you should automatically rule out, just on the basis of pride or arrogance or whatever it is, right? And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think the guy's obviously extremely talented, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 1 to 2 people make this transition in the future, although I would be rather sad if it was like 5 people doing it, because then you're blocking NA talent from having the opportunity to come up. But I wouldn't be surprised if you saw 1 to 2 players who maybe want to try this route in the future, because I think it's a route that can work. And Treats has shown it can work, and Nisqy's shown that it can work, and I think other players in the future will show that it can work too.
Yeah. So you came over to NA from Europe, coaching there with Mad Lions, and before that, when they were spliced before the rebrand. And we don't have a lot of time left, but there are a few topics about the LEC this year that I'd love to get your take on. And first of all, I think the most obvious is just, now that you're removed from Mad Lions, moved on to something else, in the sense that you moved on to another team, and you weren't involved in the changes that they've made to their roster for 2021. What are your expectations for Mad Lions and what they're going to do with the changes they made, bringing in Armut and Elyoya? Is this going to be an improvement on what they had? Or are they going to be able to make it back to Worlds and improve on the accomplishments they had there?
So Mad Lions are really interested. I will say that, how should I phrase this? I don't think in the 10-man roster that Mad Lions have, so it's 5-man and 5-man, right? But in terms of the changes that Mad Lions have made, I don't think Mad Lions have brought in any player that is not like a high quality player. I don't think that every roster decision was the best roster decision out of everyone that was available. But everyone that they brought in is really, really strong. I mean, Nita, I would say in the Super League Orange is going to be one of the top laners in that region. He's definitely one to look out for. And Armut, I know, is somebody that Aranea and in particular, but also Mac have rated highly, and somebody I rated highly too. I thought maybe he would be somebody making the transition to Academy, but he's no joke as a player. Obviously, I love Arome, I think, and I love Shadow, and I think that those guys are really, really good. But if you wanted to make a change, Armut is the person who you should be making a change to, out of all of the available options. And he's definitely somebody who's shown, when he was in Turkey, he was more stable than Broken Blade. But also, it's worth saying that sometimes stability is underrated. And I think over the course of the year, the past 2 years, since Broken Blade was considered the Turkish top laner when he was in Turkey, but was considered as somebody who was a little bit unstable, right? Like his highs were insanely high, and he had a lot of highs when he was in Turkey, but his lows were pretty low. And Armut was considered somebody who was much more stable. He's consistently top 10 in EU solo queue, and is somebody who's added that carry potential over the past 2 years that Broken Blade hasn't been in Turkey. And you kind of saw a little bit of that at Worlds. But this is something, Armut is a player who's improved year on year on year, and is very stable in how he approaches the game, and very stable in how he learns new things. And players like this often don't burst into the scene, but they show through their structure and their ability to learn, and they show steady improvement year on year and year. And these players are kind of not to be underestimated. But he's not a player that would have immediately kind of stood out if you were looking at him as a rookie. But that doesn't matter, right? Like, innate talent isn't as important as your ability to sustain it over many, many years, sustain improvement over many, many years. Elyoya, I'm a big Shadow fan. I think that Shadow had a bad World, sure, but he was a very, very strong player in Europe and was a top 3 jungler for most of the year. But if you were wanting to make a change for whatever reason, Elyoya, Tinks, and Zlatan were the top 3 rookies coming out from Academy. If those are the guys you wanted to pick up, and Xerxes was going to North America, out of those, I think Elyoya was the best pick. I like Xerxes, I like Shadow, I worked with them in the past. But if those guys wanted to go to different regions, Elyoya is the person that, if you had to ask me, do I want Dan, do I want Elyoya, who are the other rookies who are coming up? Elyoya would be the one that I would go for. Skeens is the one I would go for, but Skeens, I think Vitality are committed to Skeens for next year. But Elyoya's up there, and I think he can be really, really good. It would be between Elyoya and Tinks, and I think Elyoya has more flexibility. Tinks, if you want one guy to be kind of, in England we say Roy of the Rovers. Roy of the Rovers is like a comic book about a soccer player who like leads his team to victory, and like he scores the winning goal all the time, and he's the main carry of the team. Tinks is your man. Like Tinks has that kind of killer instinct and like the star potential. But if you want somebody who's going to be more stable, more supportive, and has the ability to carry as well, but is a bit more flexible across roles, Elyoya is the one I would go for. But Tinks on SK is very exciting as well.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I think we can hope for and look for some good things from Mad Lions, but I think the story in the LEC, as it has been for quite a while, is all G2, and they lose Perks, they bring in Rekkles. What are your thoughts on how well Rekkles is going to work in? Because I think it's pretty easy to just look at that and say, oh, the best bot laner, massive legacy in Europe, and he's going to go to G2, and now the best just got better. Is it that simple? Is it that straightforward?
I don't think it's that simple. So let's put things on the table at the start, right? Like G2 have gotten better relative to the rest of Europe. I think nobody disputes that, right? Now, are G2 going to be a better team in relation to the rest of the world? It's hard to say, because they have a lot of players who demand resources, who like games to be played in a certain style. And I think Grabs is a very, very competent coach. I think when Perks came to NA, he kind of damned him a bit with faint praise. He was like, "Oh, he wasn't completely useless," and I think that's a bit harsh on Grabs, because I think Grabs has the ability to manage teams, and he's shown even with low resource that he can do it. But that is going to be his challenge, right? They when you have a lot of veterans like this, a lot of people who won playing their specific styles. Normally when you play with veterans who haven't won, it's more easy to get them to be flexible. But when they've won, being the primary carry, having this certain style of play, getting them to change styles is not that easy, and that's going to be a big challenge. What I would say is, don't underestimate Mad Lions this year. Whatever you think about their roster changes, Humanoid, Kazi, and Kaiser have all got one more year under their belt. And that's pretty scary for the rest of the league. Like, don't underestimate how big of a deal that is. Rogue will live and die by Trimby. Yeah, Rogue will live and die by Trimby. They will either be really, really strong, or they will be kind of in the challenger tier, or maybe even below, like competing for 4 to 5, based purely on how well Trimby does. Because you don't win in Europe without having a good support. Right, like I mean, I don't think people overrate. People say EU mids, they're insane, and yes, EU mids are insane, but you don't go to Worlds with a bad support. Nobody goes to Worlds with a bad support in Europe. And the reason why G2 and Fnatic are so strong is not because they have, it's not because of their mid laners. It's because they have Hylissang and Mickey. And in fact, you look at the supports last year, the 4 best supports went to Worlds, right? Like sure. Vander, Kaiser, Mickey, and Hylissang, right? And Trimby is a rookie, and he's going to have to prove that. In the jungle role, in the mid role, there's a lot of talent. You get a lot of opportunity to challenge yourself. But support is no joke, and support is going to determine how Rogue do. Who else have I forgotten?
On the Fnatic side, I think what I'm really excited to see is you got Selfmade, loves to carry. You've got Nisqy, loves to enable a carry jungler. What do you think? Is it going to work out?
It will work out better than with Nemesis. Sure. Like it's a better stylistic match. But
that's not the only change Fnatic have made, right? They lost Rekkles, and
exactly.
that's a pretty big loss to overcome.
Yeah. I have to be careful about this, because I know Rekkles fans are very, very okay. So Rekkles, despite what people maybe believe, is not the best mechanical AD carry in the world, right? There are many AD carries, especially in China, who have better mechanics than he does. However, he is amongst the smartest AD carries in the world, right? Like the way that he plays lane, the way that he kind of leverages his experience to beat people who who could click more times than he can. The way that he uses his intelligence to beat those guys is something which is really, really beautiful to watch. And kind of if you watch Fnatic versus Top at Worlds, most people would say he got the better of JackeyLove. And frankly, on pure mechanics, on pure, I'm going to whack you with this club, like JackeyLove is a better player than Rekkles, right? Like as a better AD carry, let's say, a better AD carry than Rekkles. But Rekkles was able to get the better of him by using his intelligence, by using his wave control, by using these kind of small, dirty tricks. Let's say, he's not going to fight you in a fair fight. He's going to frustrate you. Sure. He's going to find a way to maneuver
tilt the table
around you
a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I think people kind of undervalue this experience and what it provides you in esports. And I think that this is kind of what Rekkles was going to. I would say that in terms of pure mechanics, in terms of his ability to click lots, Rekkles is a top 5, top 4 AD carry in Europe. But if you add his knowledge, he's like number 1 by a mile, right? Like he's so far ahead of everyone else. It's no joke, right? And this kind of game sense and game intelligence is something you should underrate. And by bringing in Upset is somebody who has the ability to click, right? Like in terms of his pure raw mechanics, you look at where he places in solo queue year after year. He gets multiple accounts into the top 5. He's a very good one versus one player, but he doesn't have that intelligence of Rekkles for how he plays his lane. And that's not an insult to Upset, right? Like he has strengths and he plays towards his strengths. And this is why he's really, really highly valued in Europe. But, the best thing that Upset can possibly do is literally go and grind Rekkles once for like a month. And if he can kind of combine his obvious mechanical skill and talent, which Upset has in spades, with kind of like that laning intelligence. I don't want to go into too many details because I don't want to give away kind of my coach philosophy on this, but if he could add some of these tricks that Rekkles has, then that Fnatic team can be really, really crazily good. But it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. And when you have Nisqy on your team, and when you have Bripper on your team, these are players who are willing to sacrifice for you. And Upset, I think, is probably the best player in the world who hasn't been... Well, best player in the West. I'm not going to say best player in the world, who hasn't gone to Worlds yet. I would say most people would agree to that, and this is his chance to get that opportunity, because this team will play for him and will live or die by him. So this is his chance to fulfill his promise.
What do you say to people who look at Fnatic and say, "Oh, Nisqy coming out of the LCS, and he's just going to be a weak point for these guys, and they're going to be held back by Nisqy as a player, and the rest is fine, but Nisqy's going to hold them back"?
I mean, Nisqy is a player that came through the Fnatic system, right? Like he didn't come through the Splice system. He was on Fnatic Academy. He went to North American Envy, and then he joined Splice afterwards, right? He's a player that they know well historically. He's a player that I know people in Fnatic value very, very highly behind the scenes. He's a player that even when he was on Cloud9, like he's a player that Fnatic value. Like people behind the scenes of Fnatic value much more highly than fans, and he's a player that interest didn't change when he was on Splice, and it didn't change when he was on Cloud9. If you bring up because he was considered one of the top prospects coming out from Academy that year, if you have a player like that who was able to match caps consistently in scrims, you don't forget about him, and this is kind of his homecoming. And the kind of the lukewarm response, I think, is a bit unfortunate, but maybe Fnatic could have switched the narrative a bit, right? Instead of talking about him as somebody that they brought from North America, talk about how this is his homecoming, because this is Nisqy going back to the org that scouted him to start with, that trained him, and that gave him his opportunity in his career. And I think he's going to be fine. He's going to play a slightly different style to what people are used to with Nemesis. And we'll have to see how things work out. But he's at a massive disadvantage because he's not going to be playing with Rekkles. And that's not an insult to Upset. It's just that Rekkles has the ability to carry a lot of your shot calling when things are going badly, right? And from my understanding of Upset, that's not what Upset provides, right? Upset provides you with a really, really powerful club, right? Whereas Rekkles is more like a rapier, I would say. Like he has, he's somebody that he's a sword, right? But
Very
Upset
right?
is finesse, right? But Upset is a club, and he's a very, very powerful club. He's the ace of clubs. There you go. That's how I would describe. That's how I would describe Upset.
All right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think like in the episode of Run It coming out this week, I think I used the phrase that I think Nisqy was probably the most underappreciated player in the LCS in the second half of 2020. I think people just didn't really recognize what he was bringing a lot of the time, and like would blame things on him that weren't, he was doing the right thing and the team didn't do the right thing around him. There was a lot of that, and I'm very hopeful, because when I have an opinion like that, I want to be proven right. So I'm hopeful that he'll make me look good. But we'll have to see, because he's going to have to do a lot of things right, I think, to help that team succeed. And I think it can happen.
I will say that I think Bwipo is a player that is underrated in Europe. Maybe is he overrated or is he underrated? It depends who you ask, right?
Exactly.
I think that Bwipo is a player that he is probably going to have to become the leading voice in the team. He's the one who's going to have to fill the gap left by Rekkles, and we'll see whether he can do it.
Well,
but everything that I've seen,
we know that.
Yeah, I mean he's very good at talking. But what I would say is that sometimes that's valuable. When Nemesis was going through his rough patches, Bwipo was the guy who was coming out on social media and defending him, right? When nobody else would, and I think that that's something you've got to admire in your senior players, right? The willingness to put an arm around their shoulder when things aren't going well, and to go and put your name out there and to go and defend them. And that leads me to believe that Bwipo can fill that role. But it's no joke. Like, filling in a gap left by a player like Rekkles is no joke.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a great LEC season. I think it's going to be a great LCS season. And the lock-in tournament is going to give us a really good introduction to that. Amateur and Academy is going to be very exciting this year with the entire new structure of it, and hopefully a lot higher accessibility to watch the games either live or afterwards, and better storage of VODs and all of that. So really looking forward to 2021. Really looking forward to following what you're doing within the scene during it. What's the best way for people to follow your work and your teams this year?
I would say Twitter is the best way to reach me, especially Twitter DMs. My Twitter is PCDeviator, and Deviator, and it's and follow EG as well, because I know I have to say this as EG coach, but if you want to learn about NA Academy and NA Amateur, EG Academy, EG Prodigies, watch them. Those teams are no joke, and you will see many, many of those players playing in the LCS in the next 2 years. So watch those teams and get a leg up, whether you support us or not. And you should follow at Evil Geniuses to get the updates there for them.
Great. You can support the TrueSight podcast at patreon.com/oracleselixir. You can subscribe on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as anchor.fm/TrueSight. And make sure you check out the Oracle's Elixir Discord server to talk about League of Legends esports, data science, and a lot more. Links for all of those things, as well as the things that Peter mentioned, will be in the show notes. This has been the TrueSight podcast with Peter Dunn, and I'm Tim Sevenhuisen. Thanks for listening.